but we tend to deceive ourselves as to how much we actually understand, even about the familiar things that we deal with all the time. All right, and when we don't, when we are confronted with our ignorance or incompetence, I know those two words have negative connotations, but we're all ignorant and incompetent about most things. We all know what we need to know basically to get through the day. Obviously, I'm very incompetent with Zoom, I was more competent with WebEx, I was more competent with some other things, but even those, I would be able to do everything until I couldn't. And then I would have to get somebody to help. In my last class, in another room, having the same problem, I got the computer tech assistants, and they came in and they ran into the same problem. And they couldn't, they ran into a wall that wouldn't give them administrative clearance to download and execute a program. But when we run into a problem, when we realize that we don't know something as well as we thought we did, when there's a question we don't have an answer to, we lose our sense of closure. We lose that confidence. And we don't like losing that confidence, even when that confidence was undeserved. We have a need for closure. This is a psychological, like emotional need. It's not knowledge. If it was a knowledge thing, we would think, you might think that, oh, you realized you didn't know something, so that's a good state to be aware of, right? Or you realize that some knowledge you just don't need to know. So if you don't know, if you can't explain how a bike works, you can just sort of relax and say, it's okay, I know all I need to know. But a lot of times it's actually kind of hard. Have you ever had the experience of watching a movie, especially in a movie theater? Y'all remember movie theaters? It's been a while. They're starting to open up again. But if you're in a movie theater and you're watching a movie, and one of the character actors, not one of the main actors, but somebody else you see, and you're like, I just saw that guy in something else. Okay, well, you can't pause the movie in the movie theater, so you can just put that out of your head and forget about it and come back to it later, right? No, I need to get my phone. I'm going to get on IMDb and look up this movie and see the list of actors. See that name, see the characters being played by this actor, and I'm going to go to that actor's page. And so meanwhile, the movie's playing. You're missing part of the movie here, but I just have to know where I just saw that actor before. And wherever else I saw that actor, it's not relevant to the movie I'm watching. And I'm at Alamo Drafthouse, and they're asking me to leave now because I got my phone out. We have that feeling, just this awareness that there's something missing, something that you now know that you don't know. It creates this need for closure. So what do we typically do when there's something that or one of our beliefs or assumptions is being challenged, or we realize we don't know something? What's the first course of action? Looks like you're already there. Huh? Google it. And when you Google it, how many pages of Google search results do you sift through before you decide on the most competent source for an answer? Really? 2? That's awesome. I'm impressed if you got past the first 3 listings on the first page. Usually the first page listed is what? Huh? Yeah, Wikipedia. Well, I mean, there may be a paid sponsor that has paid Google to be the top rating, but it will say ad. But usually the one after that is going to be Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia is a fine place to start when you don't know something. You go to Wikipedia and then you look at what people are saying is a summary. It's a very simplified description, but they will give you the sources for the more accurate information. So you click on the number at the end of the sentence, and it will take you down to the bottom. You check on that source, and you can then go find that source. You guys do that, right? Well, you know how to do it, or you do it. I know you know how to do it. How often do you actually do it? I mean, for the most part, you can kind of rely on the fact, if it's nothing major at stake here, you can rely on the fact that if somebody posted inaccurate information on Wikipedia, somebody else probably came along behind them to challenge it. But even then, you really have to get into the editor's view, where people are making notes on each other's comments and stuff like that to see, okay, which of these descriptions is controversial? Which of these is pretty settled? Which of these is, still unknown, but just, which of these is speculation? And sometimes if it's just a page that doesn't get, editors looking at it very much, there may be just gross inaccuracies there. So the point is, like, our answers are never just right there for us, but we don't usually look that far. We don't usually look that long. What these psychologists, Richter and Kluglansky, they studied the need for closure. They found that people do two things: they seize and freeze. So when you realize you don't have something, you seize the first answer that comes along, the top listing on Google, or the top listing that seems like an answer. But notice you seize an answer, not the answer. I mean, it might be the answer by pure luck, but you don't know. You're just kind of seizing the first thing that comes along. But then once you've got it, you don't want to let go. You want to freeze on it, because if you let go of that answer, if you say that answer is a little bit simplistic, that answer is actually obsolete, more recent evidence shows this. Trying to explain to my doctor, of all people, that cholesterol is not actually correlated with heart disease. I know there were some studies back in the 70s that have gotten repeated in pharmaceutical industry advertisements, but research over the past 10 years, including the FDA and CDC, has shown that cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Cannot tell my nurse that, or my doctor, or my father-in-law can't tell his cardiologist that, because it takes an average of 17 years for new scientific medical information to trickle down to your local doctor's office. An average of 17 years. Sometimes it takes longer than that. We all remember when the CDC said a year and a half ago, you don't need a mask. You don't need a mask. COVID is most likely transmitted by contact surfaces, so wash your hands, sing happy birthday twice, whatever. Remember that? And then they came out later and said, no, actually, you do need to wear a mask. It is airborne. You need to wear a mask to keep yourself from spreading it, but a mask may not protect you. And then later they found actually the mask does kind of protect you a little bit. But people, because the CDC changed their recommendation, people took that as a sign of incompetence. But it was actually the exact opposite. If they had doubled down on that, we're right, all you got to do is wash your hands, then they may have inspired confidence in people, but they would continue to be wrong. And we would have even more unnecessary spread of COVID than we already do. So the fact that somebody admits they're wrong socially, that tends to trigger this lack of confidence in us. But if we think about it, we realize, okay, this is somebody who's willing to update their misunderstandings. This is somebody who's constantly looking to find if they're wrong, especially with a new situation like COVID was. We had coronaviruses before, but nothing like this specific strand, because it just spread so much faster and did not respond the way past like SARS viruses, which is also a coronavirus. It didn't behave the same way. So the entire medical community all the way across the world were struggling to understand it in real time as it was spreading. So we can understand why, okay, this is something complicated. And if somebody gives you simple answers, simple advice to deal with a complicated problem, you're probably going to have to update that simple advice several times before it really becomes accurate. But people don't like to do that. They want to freeze on the first answer, the first simple answer. Just tell me a simple answer like wash my hands and it goes away, right? So I'm going to translate this. I put this up here for a reason. I don't expect you to know it verbatim. This is very much scientists writing for other scientists. But what they point out is the need for closure may induce a bias toward permanent knowledge. This may introduce a preference for abstract knowledge that affords permanence or consistency across situations. Okay, what that means is, give me some abstract statement that is vague enough, I can use it in lots of different situations. Like wash your hands so you don't spread germs. Which is true, wash your hands, you won't spread some germs, but some germs you spread by just exhaling. Some germs are, spread just by the, airflow in the room. So I prefer, like, as someone learning new information, I prefer to have simple advice. But the problem is, reality is not that simple. You may have heard the phrase, keep it simple, stupid, KISS. People use that a lot of times to say, like in writing, I've heard writing teachers say this, and I try to encourage them not to use it. That actually started as an aeronautical design phrase, because during the 50s and 60s, when people were trying new designs for jets because jets were relatively new as opposed to prop planes. They would go a lot faster, so you actually didn't need as much or as large a surface area for the wings as you would for a prop plane. But people were adding extra fins and things like that, and the designers were saying, okay, don't add these extra things, even though you might think it helps the plane stay stable or stay aloft. If they're not necessary, don't put them on there. So notice that was a design description, which you would test to see if it worked or not, and then if you didn't need it, you wouldn't include it, but if you did need it, you would include it. But when it comes to understanding something, I think a better phrase to remember is Einstein's apocryphal advice. Explanation should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. So you want to explain something accurately. So if you ask me, like, how does a helicopter work? I could talk about how lift and the rear propeller stabilizes and stuff like that. That would take a while. Or I could just say it's magic. I mean, that's a simple explanation, right? How does a computer work? Magic. How does a helicopter work? Magic. How does COVID work? Magic. But that, for one thing, is inaccurate. And even if I said that COVID is spread by like air, okay, that's true, but it also doesn't tell us like, okay, what do we do to keep from getting it? What do we do to keep from spreading it? What do you do if you've already got it? So people like simple answers because they like the feeling of knowing, the feeling of closure. But notice simple answers may give us that feeling without actually giving us real answers. So this seasoning and freezing process isn't really about the desire to be accurate, to have an accurate understanding. It's about the desire to feel like we have an accurate understanding. And it also creates a desire for consensual knowledge exhibiting stability and consistency across persons. In other words, I want you to tell me I'm right. I want you to believe the same thing I believe, because even if you don't confront me and tell me I'm wrong, if you just have a different assumption, then that implicitly challenges mine. So if we disagree on something, that means one of us is right and one of us is wrong. I don't want to be the wrong one. I don't like you now. That's a simplistic way of putting it, but we're going to see that that actually, unfortunately, does kick in way too often. Even when our stated goal is to actually understand something, we tend to then fall into this social competition that is really no longer focused on accuracy, but focused on the sort of who's going to get the social validation of appearing to be right. Okay, but that process, we can study that on the individual basis on things that we know that we're not competent in. But remember, you read last time Jerome Groopman's description of very competent, very well-educated, very smart people do the same thing. They have this pattern recognition, this flash of, oh, I know what pattern explains these symptoms. I have a heuristic, this rule of thumb that is usually true, like stress causes stomach pain. So this woman, Leslie, comes into her doctor and says, I've been having chronic stomach pain. And the doctor thinks, okay, something that's frequently true is that stress causes this. Is there anything in your life that's stressful? He said, yeah, I just had my third child. Okay, well, he's made an attribution error. In other words, an attribution is an assumption about the cause of an effect. And that attribution, attributing the stomach pain to stress, is something that is frequently accurate. But in this case, it was not. But he's anchored to it. He sort of feels like, he feels a little too confident. He has that feeling of closure. He's got this premature closure. In other words, it's closure that has not been earned yet. But he feels like he's got an answer to give her. And then he begins to do what we unfortunately do too often, even what smart people like doctors do, and that is to confirm that foregone conclusion, rather than to look for other explanations. And as we saw in that article, if the doctor had looked at the blood test, he would have seen that there was evidence that it was a cancer, not just stress. But he wasn't looking to disconfirm his hypothesis. He was looking to confirm it. So let me look for evidence of stress in this woman's life. If you want to look for evidence of stress in anyone's life, you can find it. Doesn't usually take very long. But his goal, just naturally, instinctively, was to confirm his hypothesis rather than looking for disconfirming evidence. That was the point of the cognitive reflection test. That was the point of the Wasson selection task. We typically look for or test examples that will fit with the pattern we think is already there. We rarely deliberately try to test or look for evidence that we're wrong. When actually looking for evidence that we're wrong, that we are wrong, will help us figure out we're wrong faster, makes us more accurate. All right, I briefly mentioned this on Monday, but when it comes to certain identity-connected beliefs, like political beliefs, religious beliefs, things like that, when someone challenges them, we respond to this intellectual threat as if it was a physical threat. Literally the same parts of the brain that you use to respond to a bear or a car that's about to hit you, or somebody taking a swing at your face. The insular cortex and the amygdala become activated when you're told, if you believe that the face on Mars was actually built by aliens, and you believe that all the evidence that came later to show that landform does not look like a face, all that was faked by NASA because NASA's a big conspiracy and they're hiding the aliens from us. If you believe that and somebody tells you that face on Mars does not now and never has looked like a face, we have zero evidence that it ever actually looked like a face. More recently, we've got they're not UFOs anymore, they're unexplained aerial phenomena. Am I getting that right? The Tic Tacs, I'm gonna actually pull that up here. Go away. I can actually play the video, but I just want to show the thumbnail here. Okay. So these things, in the heads-up display on fighter craft, they've been finding these. That's about as detailed as they get. These objects that look like they're moving at hyper supersonic speed, and on 60 Minutes, some of the investigators who've been looking into this went on 60 Minutes and said, we have these things out there that we can't explain that are moving at this speed. Well, what these guys do, these Corridor Crew is actually a cool channel. These guys that specialize in movie, like computer generated graphics, things like that, video editors, they looked at this and sort of explained how lens flares can cause this kind of thing, especially when you have motion tracking cameras. In other words, this object that we're looking at isn't just right in front of the plane. It's like 10 miles in front of the aircraft. And the aircraft is moving, and there's this object. It could be another plane. It could be a seagull. But there's the camera, the computer is locking onto that and holding that fixed in its view. But that means that the background is then moving at the same speed, or being recorded as moving at the same speed as the plane. You have this parallax problem. And so it looks like the object is moving at twice the speed of the plane in some cases. So, but people will look at that, if you look up, instead of Corridor Crew and aliens, if I looked up Joe Rogan and aliens, you would get this long tirade about how the aliens are real, this proves it, and anyone who says otherwise is part of the conspiracy, or willfully ignorant, or whatever. So when people, and I probably could have pulled up a video of this, when people tell Joe Rogan that there's no conspiracy, he gets a little hostile. I mean, for an MMA guy, he stays pretty relaxed. But you can see people get really agitated when a belief that they're really certain about is challenged. And so what's happening is, instead of the part of the brain that usually takes in new information, like before your first day on campus, if you saw that, okay, I've got at 12 o'clock, I've got English 1301 in Corpus Christi Hall. Okay, where's Corpus Christi Hall? I'll pull up the map. Okay, there's CCH. There's how I get there. So your amygdala was not activated then. Your frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex, that said, okay, I'm looking for new information that I'm aware that I'm unaware of. I want to find that information. We'll seize and freeze on it, but I've got it now. But after you've frozen on something, like if you thought the Performing Arts Center was CCH, and you thought, oh, look at all the windows in that place. I probably have a view of the bay while I'm in class. That'll be cool. But then you realize, oh no, it's that building that, well, we actually do have windows in here. Most of the classrooms here kind of suck because they don't have any windows except that look out into the hallway. But you might have been disappointed if you dangle a treat in front of your dog and then take it away and say, nope, can't have that. He's not going to go from, curiosity to, okay, well, I guess not. He's going to be agitated. It's like there needs to be a fight or something. But political beliefs, identity-based beliefs, especially when you assume there's some sort of antagonism there, like a conspiracy is hiding something from you, or somebody's withholding information or trying to mislead you, then that can actually literally feel like and actually use the same brain areas as dealing with an actual physical threat. So little wonder that Julia Galef describes this as the soldier mindset. I'm going to switch over to Galef really quickly. Well, first of all, where did this letter come from?
The one that I don't know the exact name, but Linda with the spies.
Yeah. So where was the letter found?
Trash can.
Yeah. And where was that trash can? Huh? No, wasn't in France. It should have been in France, but it was in Germany. And it was a cleaning lady that found it, but she wasn't a German cleaning lady. She was a French spy. And she realized when she read that there was a spy in France that was working for the Germans. So she took this letter back to French intelligence and said, somebody in our ranks is sending this information to the Germans. And it's information only a high-ranking person would have access to. So that helps us narrow down the field to, I don't know, 50 to 100 people. That's still a lot of people. So what other heuristic did French intelligence use to narrow down that field of about 100 people down to Captain Alfred Dreyfus? Before they got to the handwriting, there was another heuristic they used. Yeah. Religion, ethnic identity. He was Jewish. And I know people think of anti-Semitism as like a German thing, but it was a very European thing for about 1,000 years. Because Jewish people had affiliation with Jewish people in countries across Europe, people in those countries who only sort of affiliated with people, in their own country would see Jewish people as if they were like another national identity, as if they were like their own nation. Romani people, that people called gypsies, were treated sort of the same way. It's like if you're not exclusively one of my identity group, if you're not a real American, then even though you live here, even though you're a citizen here, even though you're in the military serving this country, you're still not seen as like a real Frenchman, as a real patriot. So it's sort of like they looked through this long list of people who could have been the spy, and they just automatically assumed because he was Jewish that he was less French, that he was less loyal, less patriotic, and therefore more likely to be the spy. Now, they didn't just stop there, obviously. They did look for other types of evidence. What did they do next? Can you mention? That's when they looked at the handwriting. But notice they're not going through all of these people and saying, let's look at everybody's handwriting compared to the letter. Let's just look at Dreyfus's handwriting compared to the letter. And it didn't not look kind of the same-ish. So they went to a handwriting expert and they said, let's get some expertise on this. Let's go to 2 handwriting experts. And what do those experts say? Yeah. One says, yes, haha, I knew it. And the other says, maybe not. Oh, well, huh. So that's when they said, okay, there's one piece of evidence for treason and one against, right? Well, now what can we do with that one against? Because I really don't. The guy that said that the handwriting didn't really match, he's affiliated with the Bank of France. And the Bank of France, you know how the Jews are all up in the banks and stuff. You can't really trust him. So let's throw that evidence out. In fact, let's use that as evidence that there is actually this Jewish conspiracy, because the Jews are so pro-German and anti-French. So they could almost use that same heuristic to throw out counter evidence. Go to the text itself here. Okay, so as Galef says, a mixed verdict wasn't what the officers were hoping for, but they remembered expert number 2 worked with the Bank of France, World of Finance was connected with Jewish men, so they could use that to dismiss evidence they didn't like. That is an example of disconfirmation bias. It's like confirmation bias where you welcome evidence that supports your hypothesis, you want to confirm it, but also evidence that disconfirms it, you want to get rid of that, so that's the disconfirmation bias. In other words, when you want to confirm, you say, can I believe it? In other words, can I believe that this guy's handwriting kind of matches what we know is the spy letter? And yeah, I mean, if you look at it a certain way, it kind of looks, I can convince myself of it. But notice it's not being very objective, not saying should I believe it, it's just can I believe it? And then when somebody else says it doesn't fit, is there something, do I have to believe this second handwriting interpreter? Or is there some excuse I can tell myself to dismiss what he said and to dismiss him as a person? So that's the must I believe it. We do both of these things in the soldier mindset because the goal isn't to be more accurate. The goal is just to defend that foregone conclusion. Galef calls this directionally motivated reasoning, or as she says here, more often just motivated reasoning. In this class, we're just going to say motivated reasoning for this. The other critical reasoning, what she calls accuracy motivated reasoning, is what we're going for. But notice how unnatural that is. Even, and again, this is something that is a butt of a lot of jokes, but military intelligence, the goal should be what? What's more important than anything, especially like in the Dreyfus case? Is it to confirm a foregone conclusion? What's in the best interest of France militarily in this situation? Yeah. Because if it's not Dreyfus, there's still somebody out there. And in fact, there was still somebody out there. Esterhazy, the actual guy, even after they convicted Dreyfus on anecdotal evidence, and he was sent over here, he was off the coast of South America in a penal colony on an island by himself in solitary confinement. And yet the letters with the same handwriting were still making their way over to Germany, still giving up French military secrets. So what did the French intelligence say at that point? Have it here. Huh? Wait, what? Who said that?
Oh, I don't know, someone said, I think it's when they said that someone taught someone else how to write exactly like
Yeah. Yeah. So the obvious answer is not that the spy is still out there, but there's a whole Jewish conspiracy out there fabricating new letters, deliberately making it look like Dreyfus's so they can get Dreyfus out of jail. Because like whenever spies get caught, let's say he was a spy, when spies get caught, their governments immediately do everything they can to get them back, right? No, it's like they totally disavow, like, I don't know who that guy is. But no, in this case, like, oh, there's this international conspiracy to fabricate these letters. Well, which is more likely? This international conspiracy, or we got the wrong guy? Well, it can't be us. And notice Picard, Galef establishes he was also anti-Semitic. He's the one that made the comment about the gold braid when Dreyfus was publicly stripped of his medals. Picard made the comment that he's Jewish, remember, he's probably calculating the value of that gold in that braid. Well, if you're in the military, the value of the decorations on your uniform has nothing to do with what the thing is made of. Dreyfus was being stripped of something very valuable to him. And that is the evidence of his service to his country. And it could be taken away that easily. That had to be, he had to be losing a lot more than that. So it was a pretty cold thing for Picard to say. And he also said, Dreyfus, was acting guilty, stuff like that. So he wasn't just like, some, social justice champion or anything. But he was like a military man thinking, okay, it's most important that we actually find the guy. So when he looked at Esterhazy's letters, not knowing they were Esterhazy's, the new ones, he saw that, oh, that actually looks like the one that we were saying was Dreyfus's letter. But notice how the resistance he got. He got, he was actually sent on missions where his superiors were hoping he wouldn't come back because he was raising questions they didn't want to answer. They wanted to just say, it's Dreyfus, that's it, it's done. And so they were willing to, like, do the Uriah the Hittite strategy. When King David wanted to get rid of the husband of Bathsheba, we'll put him on the front line. They were pretty much doing this with Picard, trying to get rid of him because he was threatening their feeling of closure, even though he was actually serving their best interest. That's kind of the soldier mindset on steroids. But Picard had the scout mindset. He realized that, like, okay, if we're wrong, we need to know it, because if we're wrong and we don't know it, we're actually in a lot of danger. Our troops are in danger. Our military interests are in danger. All right, I'm going to have to kind of cut it short there, but you've got a quiz in the quiz section of Blackboard, and it should be visible now. So if you go to the quizzes section, which is just below the schedule of readings and assignments on the left-hand column, click on that. You should see quiz 1, metacognition. You click on that, the timer will start. You've got 10 multiple choice questions. You've got about a minute each. I mean, you got 10 minutes total, so if you answer some questions quickly, you'll have more time on others. You can use your handwritten notes, not copied and pasted digital text, not your phone, not printout, but you can use handwritten notes. And if you have any questions about ambiguities of questions and answers, raise your hand, let me know, and I'll come around and help interpret. I won't give you hints, but I will try to make sure you understand the question and the possible answers. It should be easy enough, but this is one of the more challenging ones, so don't feel bad if you don't do great. And then once you're done, that's it. Have a good weekend. Come ask me any questions you might have up here.